Good morning. Welcome back to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes for Sunday, July 9th, 2023. It's about 7:30 in the morning. As always, I pretty much just woke up, just stepped out of the shower, having my first cup of coffee of the morning. I'm not really sure what I'm going to talk about this morning. That's the difference I find between a video journal like this and a written journal. Because with a written journal, quite often I don't know what I'm going to be writing about. I always write about what happened in my life the day before. It's as if I'm writing a letter to a friend and I'm just telling them what I did yesterday, what I experienced. And then that will lead to other thoughts and other thoughts and other thoughts. But when you're writing, it's a more thoughtful process. There's more time and things just sort of evolve naturally. But speaking into a camera like this, it's almost like being on a movie set, where the director just shouted at you, action. And then, it doesn't feel as leisurely, and thoughts don't have as much time to naturally develop. Plus, of course, with shooting video, even simple video like this, there's so much technology involved. So there's a long setup process. There's always something. And of course, if you're writing in a journal, as long as your pen has ink or your keyboard, the keys aren't popping off, you don't really have to worry about that much. You turn it on and you start typing. But it's a different sort of experience. So the first thing on my mind, I don't want it to be, but it is, is technology. Because my media mod, like the GoPro, fits inside a case that they call the media mod. And the only reason I have it and use it is because that's the one of only two ways to plug a microphone into the GoPro. So if I want to use this Rode, I have to add the media mod to the GoPro. And I've always hated the media mod. I think it's one of the most poorly designed pieces of tech I've come across. From the day I saw it and started using it, it arrived in the mail and I opened the box and started using it. And I was like, what? Really? I had that reaction. I shot like an hour and a half long video tearing the thing to pieces when I first saw it. And since that day, I've just had more and more time to dislike it and its design. And one of the main problems with it is that once you put the GoPro inside it, you have no access to anything. You have no access to the battery, and you have no access to the memory card. And when you put it inside the media mod, when you put it inside the media mod, to mount it on anything, the little feet of the GoPro stick through the bottom of the media mod, and then you mount it, which means essentially that the GoPro is locked inside the media mod. And the only way to get it out is to completely dismantle whatever mounting apparatus you have. So those two features combine to make it incredibly awkward and such a pain. So, I change batteries all the time. If I go out for a day of shooting, I'll put in probably 4 GoPro batteries before the day is over, sometimes as many as 5. Also going through memory cards. So every single time you have to dismantle your entire mounting apparatus, this is the important part, undo the hinge, because there's a door, you put it inside and you close the door and there's a latch that clicks into place. You have to unhook the latch, open the door, undo the whole mounting apparatus, pull out the GoPro, pull out the battery, put in the new battery, and then do everything in reverse. Put the GoPro back in, close the door, it clicks into place, remount it, and it's just such a pain. And one thing I was worried about is that I changed batteries and memory cards so often that I'm constantly opening the door, undoing the latch, opening the door, closing it. And things like that aren't designed to stand up to that much use. I think the people at GoPro were thinking, well, you put your GoPro in and then you close the door and then it stays closed for a month or 2 months. You don't open that door very often, but in normal usage for someone like me, you're opening it 4 or 5 times a day, if not more. Because at the end of the day, you have to take your memory card out to, download the files and on and on. You're constantly opening that door, and it wasn't designed for that. And yesterday, the day finally came, because opening the door is really hard. You got to get your fingernails into this little slit, this little, and then it hurts. It really hurts to get in there. And then you're pulling down, and it takes a lot of force. And if you're not really, really careful, you'll snap the latch right off. And I was aware of that possibility because, I could feel it. And yesterday I was, I guess, a little bit distracted. I was doing a bunch of different things, and the GoPro, I wanted to do something with it. I had to open the door, and I guess I wasn't paying attention. I pulled down on the latch, and it just snapped right off the GoPro. So now the entire door on my Media Mod is broken. I can't close it. It won't lock into place anymore. So that's annoying. So I have to figure out what to do about that. I may just remove the door because, to be honest, the way this is designed, the door has no function. It doesn't really need to be there. It doesn't hold the camera mounting thing in place because you're still attached to the mounting fingers on the GoPro itself. So the GoPro is firmly attached to whatever grip you put it on. The Media Mod has nothing to do with that. And on the door, there's a power button, to turn the GoPro on and off. But the only reason that power button is there because when you close the door, it covers up the power button on the GoPro. So when they put a door on this thing and it covers up the power button, well, they had to put another power button in the door so that you push that button, which pushes that button. So it's just completely redundant. You don't need it. And the only thing it does, because when you slide your GoPro into the Media Mod, the USB-C plugs in. And when you close the door, it kind of pushes the GoPro into the USB-C port and holds it there. So that's the one thing it does. And there's a very good chance, however, that you don't even need that. Like if it's on a tripod like I have it now, no, you don't need it at all because the GoPro is going to stay in place, no problem. You don't need the door, you don't need the latch. If you're walking around with the GoPro on a selfie stick, same thing, unless you're swinging it around and clubbing people with it. You're just holding it normally. There's not going to be any shaking or jarring motion, and the GoPro is just going to sit snugly inside the 3 sides of the Media Mod, and the 4th side, the door, you don't really need it. It's nice to have it there for security so that the GoPro doesn't shake loose, but it doesn't really need to be there. So I'm probably just going to remove the door entirely. I was thinking you could leave the door on and somehow wrap around a rubber band that holds it in place, but I discovered very quickly you can't do that because the rubber will touch the touch screen on the back of the GoPro, and it just operates all the controls. Any light touch there by anything will just start turning things on and hitting. It'll start changing settings. You can't have a rubber band going over the back of the screen and it's covering up the screen anyway. I have not found a solution for this problem. So, I think I just have to remove the door and then hope for the best. We'll see what happens. The other technology on my mind is a better topic, a happier one. As recently I started listening to music again after a long time of not listening to music because I just listened to podcasts. But I don't know, I just started listening to music, and I went through this process of figuring out which of my devices to use for listening to music. And I had an old iPod Nano, which still had lots of music in its memory. And then I have this iPhone, an iPhone SE, which is a very small and lightweight and elegant little device. And the problem with the iPod Nano that I mentioned is it has 8 gigabytes of memory. And I have a lot more music than that, and this has 128 gigabytes of memory. So after using the Nano for a few days, I started to wonder whether it would be better to use this. I mean, I have it. Why not, use it to listen to music? So I turned this into my music player, loaded my entire music library into iTunes, as far as I can tell, that's the only way to do it. It's not like an Android phone. Like on an Android phone, I have the ability to just copy into folders, which is what I did do with my music. I also have all my music on this phone. And all I did was plug in a thumb drive with all my music on it, and I copied it into a folder. I just created the folder and I gave it a name and I called it, I don't know, Doug's Music. And my entire library was copied into there. And then when I wanted to listen to whoever, Beth Orton, I just open up that folder, find the Beth Orton folder, open it, and choose an album. And I'm good to go. It's not so fast, but I don't mind that. I'm going to be listening to the album for a while. And when I start listening to music, I'll often listen to the same album on repeat. So getting to that album and opening it and starting it to play and just putting it on repeat, that, it's fine. I like having that kind of control. But as far as I can figure out, you can't do that with an iPhone. I tried. I can actually see when I plug it into my laptop, I see this series of tabs across the top, and at one point it says Files, and it looks like, file structure. You could go into Files and create a new file folder and copy things into it, but you can't. It's just completely blocked and grayed out, and you can't use it. You have no user access to the files and folder structure on the phone. It's all locked away. So as far as I can make out, the only way to put music on here is through iTunes. So that's what I did, and it didn't really work that well. Had a few problems with it. And then even when it was successful, about 50% of the album art doesn't show up. It's not a deal breaker, but it's kind of nice. I have all the album art. I talked about this in another video. And I went to all the trouble of getting all the right album art. I did it manually. I found it on the internet and copied it and then put it in, so it's all there. And when I look at it on my laptop in iTunes, all the album art shows up. So I know it's there and I know it works, but when I copy it into iTunes on the phone, for whatever reason, the album art doesn't show up. So that's a little bit of a glitch. And in the past, I've had lots of problems with iTunes. To me, it's a very buggy piece of software, and it can be disastrous. You hit a button by accident, and your whole iTunes library just implodes or explodes, and you have to rebuild the whole thing. So I've never been very happy with iTunes. But of course, even talking about iPod Nano and iTunes, it shows just how out of touch I am. And I tend to fall behind with all technology. And then yesterday, a Planet Doug subscriber reached out to me and set me up on Spotify. Thank you very much, by the way, for doing that. And of course, I've heard of Spotify. Streaming, right? The modern world is not about having your own copy of anything. The modern world is about streaming services. Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and Disney, or all these things. That's where you get your TV and movies from. You stream them. You don't have DVDs anymore. You don't have digital copies. You don't have Blu-rays. You stream them from the internet, from these services. And of course, you pay a monthly amount for this ability. And music is the same. I don't know how many music streaming services there are, to be honest. The only one I can think of is Spotify. And I've heard about it. I know about it. It's in the news all the time. Everybody talks about it, but I've never seen it, never tried it out. I didn't even know that there was a free version. So, yeah, yesterday when my Planet Doug benefactor contacted me and, like I said, set me up on a premium Spotify account. So what I first had to do was just sign up. I had to create an account. So I opened a Spotify account, and then that would be a free account. And I didn't even know that was possible. Had I known, maybe I would have tried it out before. And I guess when you have a free account, they show you ads and they take away certain features and some power, features you can do. Normally, free accounts don't bother me because a lot of the high-powered features I tend not to use on most devices anyway. I use my technology in the most basic way. So the fact that, okay, this high-powered feature is not available doesn't bother me. Ads, depending on the frequency and that sort of thing, they can be a bit annoying, but I put up with ads on YouTube. So I don't have a premium YouTube account, so I get ads all the time, and I spend a lot of time on YouTube, so I'm dealing with ads all the time, and I seem to be able to handle that okay. But, so I guess Spotify, I could have been playing around with it a long time ago, but I just never did. So yesterday, when I signed up for the account, and then I signed up for the premium account, it was the first time I'd ever seen it. I'd never seen anyone else use it, I don't think. I've certainly never used it. And yeah, it was really eye-opening because I think with a lot of modern technology, there is resistance. You like what you know. You're using something, you've been using it for years, it works for you. And when someone comes along and tries to get you to change, to use something else, something better, newer, I think the natural human response is, to resist it. Like, no, this works fine for me. Whatever you're offering, I don't even want to hear about it. It's no. I'm happy with my, my iTunes library, this stuff. But quite often, well, I had that experience, for example, with cashless, when I saw other people using, touch and go cards and e-wallets. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what they were doing, and it struck me as very complicated and kind of scary. And it's like, I'll just use money, like an old person, what was wrong with money? Why did we have to fix money? You get on the bus, you pay with money. You go to 7-Eleven to get a vanilla Coke. You give them money, they give you the Coke. I mean, what was broken about money that we needed all this? I'm happy with my money. But then once I finally got a touch and go card and an e-wallet here, and in Thailand, I was getting into online stuff more and more, buying things online, paying for them online. I was getting into that world a little bit. But the big leap forward was e-wallet and touch and go. And once I started using it, it was like, and restaurants, the QR code for the menus. Love it. Now I'm all about that. I just start using it and it's like, okay, this is how it works. And once it's actually pretty simple. It seems complicated from a distance, but once you've got it set up, it's like, wow, this is kind of cool. And now I love it. And I'm suspecting that Spotify is going to be the same thing for me. Here it is here, I've got Spotify. And I started using it yesterday for the first time, and like right out of the gate, I was impressed. I just went, oh, nice. Because at the beginning, it asks me for, what kind of music do you like? And I guess you can input at the beginning up to 10 artists, music that you like. And I only put in 3. I was trying to think of like a range. I'm into a lot of classic rock, but I listen to folk. I listen to, different types of music. So I didn't want to just put in, typical 70s, 80s rock bands. It's like, oh, Aerosmith, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, I love that music. Because that's all I'll get. So I tried to think I only wanted to do 3. I wasn't going to try and do 10. Maybe I'll add. I think over time it learns what you like and will just, develop its database of you. But I mean, I could have put in 10, but just because I was doing a bunch of things, I didn't have a huge amount of time. And I thought I'd just put in 3, and I put in Led Zeppelin. So that was going to be my classic rock symbol. And I put in Green Day, so that's kind of, what do you call Green Day? Modern, like progressive? No, it's not prog rock, is it? I don't know what you call Green Day, but it seems different to me than Led Zeppelin. Classic rock, and then Green Day. And then I put in an artist I already mentioned once this morning, Beth Orton, who I really like, a female vocalist. And I thought, okay, that's kind of a good range to start with. I kind of wanted to put in like Beethoven or something because I do enjoy classical music. but I only put in 3. So as soon as I did that, and then I opened up Spotify, okay, it was kind of a good choice, because now I've got playlists. My Green Day style playlist, my Beth Orton style playlist, and it's introducing me. Here I am telling people out there about Spotify. I'm sure everyone out there knows a whole lot more than I do, but to me it's all very eye-opening. Green Day mix, 70s, 80s, 90s, classic rock mix, and Beth Orton mix, and then it kind of combines them. I've got a Green Day Beth Orton mix, so where they're sort of dabbling in both. And of course, it's introducing me to all kinds of artists that I've never heard of, who are similar to Beth Orton, who are similar to Green Day. Some of whom I know. It makes sense that in my Green Day mix, you get bands like Offspring, a band I also really, really like. So it makes sense that Green Day, Offspring are all mixed in together, but then they put in other bands that I'm not very familiar with. So that is very, very cool. And let's see, what if I open something? So there's Green Day, a 90s mix, Green Day, Beth Orton, and more. Let's see what's there. Okay, there's Stolen Car by Beth Orton, one of my favorite songs. But now you click on that, it starts to play, of course. But when you click on the song, again, here I'm telling people the simplest things. Of course, you get the album art, which does not show up on my iTunes. So, okay, I've got the nice album art. There's Beth Orton. I'm familiar with that. And then as you scroll down, I was not expecting this, lyrics. Obviously, of course it has lyrics. Why wouldn't it? But I never thought of that, but it has the lyrics to the songs. And I love that because I can't hear lyrics. Well, with Beth Orton, I can. That type of singer, I hear the words, and I like her writing. But, something like, I've listened to, Highway to Hell by AC/DC. I've listened to that, I don't know, a couple hundred times in my life. Some of it I can hear, but a lot of it I have no idea what they're saying. Led Zeppelin, all the songs I like from Led Zeppelin, The Who, I don't know what they're saying. I have no idea what the lyrics are. And then it has a little summary about, Beth Orton, a little biography, all about her, who she is, where she's from, and her life. I ain't getting that on my iPod Nano. So, I've got all that information. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I mean, in this 90s mix, I'm getting Good Riddance by Green Day, All the Small Things by Blink-182, Californication, Red Hot Chili Pepper, She Cries Your Name, also from Beth Orton, but from a different album, Basket Case by Green Day, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Foo Fighters, Tom Cochrane. It's like I'm being reminded of music. I mean, Life is a Highway by Tom Cochrane, very famous song. And I grew up with that, love it. I totally forgot it existed, but there it is. Zombie by the Cranberries. So these are all very popular songs that most people know. Enter Sandman by Metallica, Losing My Religion by REM. So, I mean, that is a pretty pleasing playlist if you're in the mood for, the popular songs of all the groups you know and you like. Very, very nice. But of course, I'm sure you do a deep dive into this and you're going to find all kinds of new music, more obscure stuff, things you don't know about. So I appear to have entered the world of music streaming. So that is very exciting. I'm looking forward to that. Of course, there's a downside. Not really, you can fix it. It all operates on the internet. So you need a Wi-Fi connection to do all the things I was just talking about. But as my Planet Doug subscriber told me when I was chatting with him online about Spotify, you can download too. So if you have a premium account, I guess, and if you want to listen to this music offline, then you can download it and have it in memory. You couldn't do this casual scrolling offline because you need Wi-Fi, you need the internet to do that. But you're not completely cut off because you can, in advance, download this music. And yeah, you can listen to it when you have no internet connection. So I can see a use for both. Like if I were cycling, like on a bike tour or something, or yeah, I could see using this because of the battery. You know, I don't want to have my smartphone running all day playing music because I use the smartphone for other things, and I don't want to use up the battery, and suddenly at the end of the day I'm trying to, you know, find something on Google Maps and I can't because I've got no battery power. So, you know, you're cycling all day long, and of course this is such a valuable thing for me. You know, I do all of my airline booking and banking, everything, and it basically runs my life. And you may not want to be using this in rough, dirty conditions where there's a chance of someone stealing it or something. So then, you know, this could be your music player. You know, you pop that into your pocket and run a cord up to your ears, and you're listening to music all day. That's stored in memory. So I can see both. But yeah, Spotify, very, very nice. I like that a lot. Moving on to other things, I'm still following the story of the Titan submersible. Of course, the submersible that was going down to the Titanic, and it imploded and everyone on board died. There doesn't seem to be a lot of new information coming out in the mainstream media, but something I noticed, and I find this kind of interesting, is sort of highlights a certain nature of like YouTube and other like internet-based media and news sources, because YouTube is also a news source. And the difference is that YouTube, because of the people who have YouTube channels, like in particular reaction channels, people who they're not journalists, they're not out there investigating and uncovering things and confirming data and interviewing people. They're just reading the news and reacting to it, giving their opinion on it. These reactors, they sort of come across like they're telling you what's going on in the world, but simply by reading the news, they will talk about things that may or may not be true. They're much more willing to do that than real media, you know, like CNN or ABC and like all the big traditional news outlets, where, you know, they can face major legal repercussions if they publish something that isn't true. They don't want to speculate, they want to confirm things. So the story I'm thinking of course, is the leaked transcript. Out of nowhere, I saw all these articles about how there was a transcript of all the communication between the people in the submersible and the people in the boat. The Polaris, I think it was called. So they were, you know, talking. They had a way to communicate back and forth over a type of radio that could communicate through the water. And suddenly everybody was talking about a transcript of their entire conversation right up to the second where contact was lost, and presumably, you know, the submersible imploded and everyone died. So, of course, all of the YouTube reactors jumped all over this, and they, on their YouTube channel, they would call up a text screen showing the transcript, and they read through it and talk about it. And of course, it's very titillating. You're like, if this is real, you're seeing the last communications of these people, you know, just before they died, and it's a very scary and, you know, very frightening thing. So all these YouTubers are reacting to these things. And then you see some news outlets as well. It even shows up in my news feeds. But when you investigate them, I mean, they're barely news outlets at all. They're just internet things that will post anything. So yeah, I just sort of noticed that. And I'm scanning, you know, if you go to Google News and look at all the articles from Newsweek, Hindustan Times, I know BBC. I assume Hindustan Times is a big outlet in India. The Independent, you know, all these major news sources, none of them are talking about the transcript. the leaked transcript. So yeah, I find that kind of interesting. You have to keep your wits about you when you accept your news sources, you know. We never, I was going to say we never had to really deal with that in the past as much. And I guess that's true because we're flooded with stories now, you know, whether on Twitter or YouTube, everywhere. And almost anything can be faked now. You know, video can be faked. Photographs can be faked, audio can be faked. So whatever you see, you cannot just assume it's true anymore. You really have to be careful now. And I don't think we had to be this careful in the past. Of course, things you read in the news back in the old days, pre-internet days, you also couldn't fully trust. I talked about this once before, where I've had my own experiences that taught me this lesson. Like, I saw evidence of it for myself. And it's one thing to believe that this is true about journalism. Like if someone says, well, you can't believe everything you read, you know, it's a truism. Everybody says it and we believe it's true. But until you have your own personal experience with it, then it's like, okay, it kind of makes it a much sharper truth. So the story I told before, I was in the Philippines at a time in a city where there was a major storm surge during a typhoon, and a big flood kind of destroyed the city. A lot of people died, and there was a time when there was a field outside of the city, like a big field, and it was full of bodies, like bodies, dead bodies that had been retrieved, and they're inside body bags, and then they were all laid out in a field. I think someone, like a European journalist, posted a story about this, reporting that there was a field with, I think they said 1,500 dead bodies just lying out in the open. And that was the story. I didn't realize it at the time, but something went wrong with my microphone and the GoPro. I'm not exactly what happened, but there's a whole bunch of recording that I did where I had no audio at all. And then at a certain point, as you'll see in a couple of minutes, there was a knock on the door, and it was one of the staff of the hotel offering, you know, to change the bed sheets and give me a new towel. And then when I got up from the bed to answer the door, something clicked, and the GoPro started recording again, but incredibly thinly. And then I had to boost it by 30 decibels just to make it audible. So anyway, there's this section here where there's no audio at all. And I'm now a day later, or I think it says 2 days later, I'm just sort of recreating what I said before it leads into the section where there is audio and I finish the story. But basically I was saying that, you know, there was this story of 1,500 bodies out there in the field, and that was reported. But then there were a bunch of articles from politicians in the Philippines and officials, these, you know, people involved in the relief efforts after the storm surge, and they said, no, there are no bodies lying in a field. You know, this field they're talking about with 1,500 bodies, it does not exist. I mean, the expression fake news didn't exist back then. No, it hadn't been invented yet, but they would have said, no, this is fake news, and there is no field like this. This is not true. So I had a paper, like a newspaper that I bought in the market there. The market after the storm surge was starting to come back to life a little bit, and things were coming in from outside, and you could now buy newspapers. So I bought a local newspaper, and I saw an article from quoting a politician. They interviewed Filipino government officials and quoting him saying that, no, this field does not exist. And I was holding that physical piece of paper in my hand, and I decided to go see for myself. And at that time, I had contacts with the local fire department in Tacloban City, where all this was taking place. And the fire department was in charge of collecting dead bodies and dealing with them, and they gave me directions of where to go. So I got on my bicycle. My bicycle had been really badly damaged during the typhoon and the storm surge, but I'd sort of been working on it, and it was kind of working a little bit, and I was able to ride it. So I got on my bike one day, and I rode out of the city, and I went to where this field was supposed to be, and lo and behold, there it was. I found it. In fact, it had been sealed off a little bit. They had put up like plastic tarps, like barriers along the road to sort of shield it from view. But all the local villagers would come at night and cut down all the plastic tarps and take it away because they could use it as, waterproofing. A lot of, their homes had all been damaged during the typhoon, and they're trying to repair it, and this tarp could come in very handy. So overnight, like every night, all this tarp would disappear. So everything was exposed, and I was able to ride my bike down this little driveway, and there was a field, quite a large area, filled with dead bodies inside body bags. And I did a rough estimate myself. You know how you can divide an area up into squares and then count the number of items in that square and then do the math and come up with an estimate of how many were there. And I came up with a figure of around 1,500 dead bodies in this field. And they had clearly been there for a long time. They had been there long enough that the grass and shrubbery and things like that had grown over top of them. So some of them were covered in undergrowth. They'd been lying there out in the open for so long. So there it was, the field of 1,500 bodies. Personally, I was seeing it with my own eyes, so I knew it was real and it was true. But at the same time, I was holding a newspaper article saying that this field did not exist. And there were not 1,500 bodies lying out in the open like that. So here you had, if you were someone anywhere in the world, living in Malaysia or Canada, somewhere in Europe, you'd check the news, and according to the news, no, this field does not exist. That is what you would read. And yet there I was, standing in the middle of that field, holding the newspaper, denying its existence. So when you have an experience like that, it really throws a switch in your brain about just how wrong media can be, that you really cannot believe what you read. And it also highlights how difficult it is to establish truth, right? Because here I am telling you that at that time there were 1,500 bodies in that field, but how do you know I'm telling the truth? I mean, I took pictures when I was there, so I have documentation, but of course, people will deny that the pictures are true, right? Like, how do you know anything, really, unless you see it with your own eyes, unless you touch it with your own hands, unless you smell it with your own nose, you really can never be sure of anything, really. And it's not just a simple fact of whether something exists or not, it's like the nature of things as well, where my experience of the typhoon in the Philippines and the aftermath was deeply involved in this story, because after I left the Philippines, when I was there, I was kind of cut off from the outside world. I didn't have access to the internet, I didn't have access to information. But when I finally left that area, I was able to go online, go on the internet, and look up all the stories, like this event. I wasn't aware of what a big worldwide event it was. But then I was able to go onto the internet, and I saw these stories from all over the world, from all these reporters and journalists and news outlets who came to Tacloban and reported on what was happening. I could read all these articles, everybody saying what was going on. And there were so many things in those articles that were completely, if not completely wrong, very wrong in terms of tone and perspective and the reality. I was there on the ground, seeing things with my eyes and living it day to day. And then all these journalists were coming in, covering the story, writing their article, and as far as the world was concerned, that is the situation. And yet, when I'm reading these articles, very little of it was accurate. So, I had that experience for myself, seeing something and experiencing things personally, and then seeing the media coverage around the world, and I could see just how completely different they were in so many ways. So that was a very eye-opening experience for me, and it's taught me to be suspect when I read something online or listen to a news story on YouTube. It may very well be true, but you have to train yourself to ask questions, very basic questions. They say this is true, and then you have to say, well, how do you know? How do you know? Where is your proof? You can't just repeat things that other people say and assume that it is real, that it is true. You have to question everything. So these Titan submersible leaked transcripts, fall into this category very much. And I just find it interesting that there's two classes of media now. And you've got the mainstream media with the age-old style of, they can only report what they can confirm. And yet they are very limited, and what they end up doing is going to politicians and important people, and they can report what they say. They can quote them. But then if you go to a government official and ask them a question about something and write down what they say, that's not necessarily the truth. And then you've got YouTube reactors who are free to sort of be more loose in their reporting, and they take these transcripts, whatever they are, and they say at the beginning of their story, well, we don't know if these are real or not, but then they go through the whole transcript and sort of treat it like it is real. And it's a very interesting world we live in right now. And moving on with my video journal podcast for today, I have a lot of thoughts about YouTube channels, YouTube travel vlogs in particular, and I've been following a few of them, and one of them that I'm following and that I'm going to talk about in a minute is Itchy Boots. So I've been following the travels of Itchy Boots as she goes through West Africa, because I have an interest in West Africa. I went there myself on my bicycle back in 23 years ago. So I'm really focused on her story now, and I'm following it pretty carefully. And in her most recent video, she was crossing from Sierra Leone into Liberia, and she's still having mechanical problems with her motorcycle. And at this point, I think I'll stop talking now, and the video is going to switch over to what I recorded before when I was talking about Itchy Boots originally, but the audio quality is going to change drastically. It's going to get much lower, and then I boosted it by 30 decibels, so you get a lot of background hiss and noise, and my voice is kind of thin. I thought I could re-record that entire section, but I think it's just barely good enough that you can hear what I'm saying if you're listening to it with earphones or with some good speakers. So now we're switching over to what I recorded before. Hi. Oh no, it's okay. Everything is okay. Yeah.
Towel? Towel?
No, towel is okay.
Towel
Yeah.
okay?
Yep. Okay. No problem. Thank you. Just had a knock on the door. It was housekeeping for the hotel, and they just wanted to know if I needed new towels or cleaning or bed sheets or anything. And I said, thank you, but no, I'm okay. I just got new towel and new bed sheets just like a day ago or 2 days ago, so everything's fine. And as I've talked about in the past, I clean everything myself. Staying in a room like this, you don't need it cleaned every day. That would be more of an annoyance than a help. So I generally train the hotel staff to understand that I'm okay. If I need anything, I'll come talk to you. But unless I come talk to you, you don't have to worry about me. I'm fine. I'm just I'm living my best life here. And so what was I saying? Oh yeah, with Itchy Boots. And I enjoyed this video because she's in Monrovia, the capital city of Liberia, and she had an address for what she thought might be a motorcycle shop. She said they have a really nice website, Moto Ride, she called it. I haven't looked for it, I should. Moto Ride. And she said they have a nice website, looks very professional, but the Google Maps pin, she says, they're not located there. Nobody knows where they are. They have phone numbers. She's tried all the phone numbers. I don't know if there's an email address, but she could not get in touch with them, could not find them. Nobody could help her find this place. But then just asking people on the street, just sort of, hey, do you know where I can get my motorcycle fixed? And she eventually, someone pointed her in a direction where she said there was a guy at this motorcycle shop who knows a lot about big bikes, and he happened to be from Lebanon. And as she says in her video, it turns out that if you need motorbikes worked on in this part of Africa, just ask for the local Lebanese mechanic. They're your guys. They know about this stuff. And of course, they're not certified Honda technicians or anything like that, but and she didn't really show a lot of the work being done on the bike. The video just jumped ahead. She'd met the guy, and then they started looking at her bike. She tried to explain the problem. It was one of those really frustrating problems, like an intermittent one, where the motorbike would be making this noise sometimes, but not all the time. And now she's there speaking with this Lebanese mechanic, and she couldn't recreate the noise in the moment, and that's a very frustrating thing. But then the video just sort of jumped ahead, and she's like riding away, and everything's fixed. So she doesn't show the steps, but I got the impression that she had been there for a long time, like spent the day there with everybody working on her bike, and they found a solution she thinks is the solution. And the problem was, the bike was overheating, and the fan. So the problem's related to overheating and a fan and some unusual noises that the bike was making. And it turns out what they think what the problem was, there was a sensor that turns the fan off and on depending on how hot the engine is, and that sensor was malfunctioning. So the bike was overheating and the fan was making terrible noises, and their solution was just to remove the sensor. So now the fan is on all the time. And as she explains, that's a good thing because it's always hot anyway, so it's no big deal to have the fan running all the time. That's better than having no fan, when you need one. Just run it all the time. And occasionally it will be running when technically she doesn't actually need it, but that does no harm. So we'll see in the next video. She did a little bit of, I wouldn't call it, is this not clickbait? What do you call this? Because in her last video, before this one, she ended it with her entering Liberia and her motorcycle wouldn't start. So it ended abruptly with her, and the motorcycle wouldn't start. And she was in the middle, she was far away from any city, out there all by herself, and she couldn't get her motorcycle to start. And that's where the video ended. It was like a cliffhanger, And as viewers were like, oh, what's going to happen? Oh, what's going to happen? And I think even the video title and the thumbnail was all about how her motorcycle was having mechanical problems and it won't start, implying that, oh boy, I'm in big trouble. What's going to happen? Stay tuned for the next episode to find out what happens next. But of course, in this video is the next video, and it opens with her just riding down the highway. It's like, oh yeah, it just needed to cool down. So that was, this whole dramatic ending. I watched the last video and I was wondering, oh man, how is she going to, because I knew her motorcycle was breaking down and she's trying to get to Monrovia, and now here she is, hundreds, I don't know, of kilometers away, and her she didn't make it in time, ticking clock, and how is she going to get it fixed? And I was waiting for all this drama in the next video, but no, she's just riding. So no, I just had to let it cool down for a few minutes, and then it started. So it's like, there was no drama, but hey, it kept our interest as viewers. But this whole video does raise the question for me, what I talked about before. If you're planning a trip like this, is it the best thing to do to build the perfect motorcycle machine back in your home country? Because the fancy BMWs and whatnot, yeah, they can't be repaired at the side of the road, in Liberia. So depending on where you're going, you might be better off with some kind of just have a knapsack with some clothes in it and your camera gear and a local, putt-putt bike. Just grab a local 250 bike, 250cc, whatever it is they use on the streets there. And then, of course, that bike is going to break down a lot more than her Honda Rally. But, of course, even though it breaks down more, it can be repaired more easily. That's one advantage. And the other one, of course, is you just fit in better. You're just part of the local environment, which, depends on what kind of a trip you're trying to have, what you're doing day to day. Because when you do see her on the video, in this video I really enjoyed it because she spent a lot of time in the streets of Monrovia, just jammed with the colorful local life. And I love that because to me that's what Africa is all about. That's what it looks like. And when she's out in the countryside, all by herself in the middle of nowhere on a dirt road, with beautiful vistas, okay, that's Africa as well. But I prefer to see all the hustle and bustle of, the crazy cities. In Monrovia, she was going through a very busy market area, and there were traffic jams. They all came to a halt. It was gridlock basically. And she's in the middle of, motorcycles ahead of her, motorcycles behind her, around her, tuk-tuks, just a crazy amount of traffic, and all the local men. Again, it's all men. It's always men out in the open like this, and they're all laughing and joking with her, and Itchy Boots is doing her best to keep up with the banter, with all these guys. And I really enjoy that. And then, as I said, but watching those scenes was very interesting. But then she would switch to a GoPro or the 360 camera that gives like a wide shot of her and then her environment, and man, she looks so different, right? Because she's got the gear, like all the protective gear, the high-tech helmet with the cameras and microphones, and she's got a special water backpack on her back, and like shoulder pads and chest protectors and skid pads, and she looks like some sort of a crazy alien creature that beamed down from another planet. She stands out so much, which, she wants all the protective gear, and perhaps for her as a woman, blonde-haired woman, it's kind of nice to have all these layers. She's just like this big, shapeless blob on this motorcycle. If she was riding a local bike and wearing, she would stand out more as a foreign woman on a motorcycle. She might get more unwanted attention, if that were the case. But the way she's dressed, it's just sort of like this giant round thing, just a blob on her motorcycle, covered her face. Everything is covered by the helmet all the time. And she even has a collar, that with a raised round, barrier. I think it's meant to prevent whiplash, that if you do have a crash, your head doesn't go flying all the way back or to the side. So it's like almost like a neck pillow when you're flying on an airplane. You want to sleep, you put a neck pillow and it kind of supports your chin. That she has that built into her clothing, so you can't really see what she looks like or even who she is. She's sort of a mystery person on a motorcycle, and that can be to her advantage. Another YouTube travel story. I stumbled across a channel called Wild Viking Travels, and I don't know much about them. I haven't done a deep dive into their channel yet. I sort of started at the beginning a little bit just to see where their trip began and what their ideas were. But the video that caught my eye, ended up in my feed, was one of their most recent ones from 10 days ago, 112,000 views. And the thumbnail is of a van, like a camper van. So they're traveling in a camper van, and it says, "We failed," in big letters. So that's the thumbnail. And the title of the video is, "We drove 30,000 kilometers only to have our dream destroyed in Nepal." So, I mean, that's very cleverly designed to get someone like me to click on it, because I want to know what it is they're trying to do. They've got some sort of a big journey, and it looks like they have hit the end of the road, and my mind is spinning. Okay, we failed. Their dream was destroyed in Nepal. So again, I was thinking, their van went off a cliff. They were robbed of everything they owned. They were in a village in Nepal, and the police confiscated their van, and they're being deported from the country. Their van caught fire and burned to the ground. They had an accident and broke their legs. I mean, what happened in Nepal? So I watched that video, and then I went all the way back in time and I watched the first videos where they're planning their trip. And this gives me some thoughts. Which thought should I start with? I think I'll start with the planning of the trip, because that explains this video. Their idea, they were sitting in Europe. I can't remember where they're from, but Viking. So they're from, Sweden, Norway, Finland, somewhere there. And they came up with this idea. I think the two of them, it's a man and a woman, boyfriend, girlfriend. I think they met in South Africa. They were traveling separately, and then they met, they fell in love, they became a traveling couple, and when they were back in Europe, they came up with this dream to drive a camper van all the way from Europe to Japan. So that was their dream, to go from Europe to Japan, 30,000 kilometers, and they plotted a route. That was their dream. And my immediate reaction to that, I've had this often, is that it's a weird dream to have in a way, because it's just so arbitrary in a way. Well, there's two problems I have with it. It's a bit arbitrary. You're driving a van, but your destination is an island nation. So why in the world do you want to get a van to Japan? I mean, if you told me we want to drive from Europe to Malaysia, all right, Europe to Vietnam, some sort of a country that's still in the same continent that you could feasibly get to by land. Okay, I'm sort of with you there. I really don't see the need to have sort of an arbitrary destination like that. But Japan, I mean, at the very end, you're going to have no choice but to take your van, put it in a boat, and ship it to Japan, and then reunite, and then you can drive on Japan when you're there. But somehow it was so weird to have an island nation as your final destination. Be like, I want to ride my bicycle from Toronto to Hawaii. That's my dream. It's like, okay. I mean, sure, Toronto to San Francisco, but then to Hawaii? I mean, it's not like you're going to ride your bike to Hawaii. I mean, there's an ocean in between, so you're putting your bike on a plane and then you're flying to Hawaii. I'm not sure that an island nation is the best destination for your journey. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I see this all the time, and it's a human tendency, I think. If you want to go traveling and you're planning your trip, you're sitting at home, wherever your home is, it's a natural tendency to take a pen and draw a line around the world, going through as many countries as possible. So people have a dream, I want to go around the world, or I want to go to every country in Africa, and they draw a line. And when you're at home planning your trip, that seems like a very sensible thing to do, a very romantic and exciting and amazing adventure to plan this around the world journey. But in reality, if you're looking for bang for your buck daily experiences and adventures, it's like really one of the worst things you can do, because you're going through so many countries, so many border crossings, so many visa hassles, changing currency, problems, and every country that you go through, you're following one line from, east to west. But what about all the rest of the country that you're completely missing? So you feel like, okay, I'm going to go around the world, so I've been to 75 countries. But really? Because you've only seen the narrowest little strip of each country, the 10 feet on either side of the road that you've driven down. That's all you've seen of that country. I mean, it can be an adventure. Sure, you've seen a lot of different countries. You had a lot of things happen, but I don't know. I would resist planning a trip like that. I would think more like, maximizing time in a country and different regions within that country, rather than trying to piece together as many countries as possible. But anyway, this is what they did. They came up with this dream to go to Japan by camper van. So now they're on their way and they're doing it, and I guess they got all the way to Nepal, and then in Nepal, what actually happened is they couldn't get a visa for China. They had, from there, their plan was to cross the border in their camper van into China, drive all the way through China, get to the ocean, and from there they're going to take a boat to Japan. But they tried really, really hard. They tried, I think, for months, weeks, if not months, in Nepal to finally get a visa for China, and they couldn't get one. So their dream of driving their van to Japan was destroyed, right? And again, air quotes, because, I don't know. It just seems a little bit overly dramatic to me, because it doesn't seem reasonable to want to go to Japan in the first place. I mean, why is that a dream, to ride your camper van to Japan? I don't see that as a valid goal. Like, why is that your ambition? Like I said, like, my dream is to go to Hawaii by bicycle, and I don't know, just if you want to go to Hawaii, just fly to Hawaii, and now you're there. Japan being an island nation. But even if their destination of choice was a landlocked country, perhaps their dream was to drive from Europe to Malaysia, and then at some point they ran into a barrier. A country would not let them pass through, and they were not able to make it to Malaysia. Okay, their dream was to get to Malaysia, but even though they couldn't actually get there, they made it, 95% of the way from Europe to Asia. So the dream really hasn't been destroyed, has it? They've had all the experiences of getting to Nepal, and now they just can't do that last to Japan part. Anyway, it doesn't seem like their dream has been destroyed. It just seems like, okay, we can. They could just rewrite it. They could rewrite the video title, because they're in Nepal. They could mentally go back in time and say, well, our dream was actually to go from Europe to Nepal. That was our dream, and we did it. Here we are in Nepal, and it wouldn't change anything. So, but I get it. As humans, we like to establish goals and achieve those goals, and we get invested in them. And they decided they needed to end their journey in Japan, and it turns out they were not able to do it. But it doesn't invalidate all the experiences they had getting to that point. So that was kind of my reaction to the video. I could understand a video where they were talking about, we're not going to, we can't do it. We hope to get to Japan, but we can't. So we have to redo our plans, and they could go somewhere else, or they could end their journey in Nepal. But our dreams were destroyed, and they were quite upset about it. I think there's a sequence where the woman was on her knees somewhere weeping, like just crying and crying and crying, because they weren't able to get the visa for China, and their dream was destroyed. But I don't know, seemed like a bit of an overreaction to the whole situation to me. But one very amusing thing about it, again from an English editor point of view, is that in their title they say, our dream destroyed in Nepal. And And if you go, and it's kind of a natural conclusion to think that something happened in Nepal that was the fault of the country of Nepal, or the people of Nepal, or the government of Nepal. That was something Nepalese that caused this dream to be destroyed. But of course, you watch the video, it has nothing to do with Nepal. They went to the Chinese embassy, and the embassy of China said, no, we're not going to give you a visa. So it was actually China that destroyed their dream, not Nepal. And if you scan through the comments, there's just comment after comment after comment from people in Nepal saying, your title is misleading. We didn't do anything to you. Like, it's not Nepal's fault. It was China's fault, not us. Like, why are you blaming us in the title? And the whoever was replying, whether it was him or her, was replying saying, no, we didn't say by Nepal. Our dream wasn't destroyed by Nepal. We said in Nepal, and that's different. So he's sort of explaining how English prepositions work, and he figures, okay, I've explained myself. Then the next comment, someone's saying, oh, why are you blaming Nepal? We didn't do anything. How come your title says, da-da-da? And then he says, we didn't say by Nepal, we said in Nepal, and that's different. So he's giving a grammar lesson about English prepositions. He did that so many times. So many people are saying the same thing. And I thought at some point, I don't know, give up the fight. Like, why are you sticking to your guns on this? Change the title. Like, just say what actually happened. I don't know if you want to say destroyed by China. To me, that's also clickbait. It's weird to say that. But you could take Nepal out of the title and just say, we couldn't get a visa for China. Visa denied for China. Our dream destroyed. That's what it was. They applied for a visa, they said no, and they can't enter the country, and that's just something that happens. Some countries more than others, but yeah, for China, it's pretty common to try to get a type of visa for that country, and then you run into troubles, or it's going to take a long time, which in fact was really what happened in their case. So I don't understand their story, to be honest. But they applied for visas, but they couldn't get individual visas, like tourist visas. But somehow the embassy said, well, we can give you a group visa. That we can get you. So then they had to find other people to go with them. So they eventually ended up with a group of 6 foreigners, like Westerners, going as a group. Maybe they were all going to pile in the van. And then they applied for this group visa, but then 2 of them ran into trouble because they had spent more than 30 days in Pakistan or Turkey. And I guess China has a particular problem with those 2 countries, and the way they explained it, I have no idea if this is true or if it's really a rule. It was explained to them that you can spend 30 days in Pakistan, but not more than 30. And this guy happened to be in Pakistan for 32 days, and that meant his application and passport had to undergo extra scrutiny. They had to send his passport to Beijing, and it was going to take 2 months to review him and do some security clearance on him, and then it would take 2 months for them to process it and say yes or no to the group visa. And they couldn't stay for 2 months, because by then their visa for Nepal would expire, and he can't live for 2 months without his passport. So anyway, it was a little complicated, but basically the video title should be, visa for China denied. Our dream has been destroyed. It has nothing to do with Nepal. That just happened to be where they were. And all the Nepalese people were, pointing this out, but instead of changing the title, he's like, no, we said in Nepal, not but. And it just made me think of all my time as an English teacher and an English editor, because I work for magazines where we teach English, so I would be answering a lot of questions about English grammar. And of course, English grammar has some rules, but sometimes it seems like more exceptions to the rules than actual rules, and prepositions are so tricky. There's no solid rule about when you use in and by and to and of. Once you get into English prepositions, just forget it. But made me smile. I was thinking about trying to explain to students all the time when we use on, when we use in, when we use by, So I'm just thinking, dude, quit fighting. Just change the title. Don't say in Nepal. Change it to something else. But yeah, he didn't want to change it apparently. It's been 10 days anyway, and he hasn't changed it. He's still fighting the good fight. Actually, I'm going to check right now and see if there are any new comments, very recent ones, about this preposition problem. Well, as Spock would say, fascinating. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think about this a lot. The YouTube culture, more the internet culture in general. I remember years ago when the internet was, bursting on the scene, and it was more of a wild, wild west. Things weren't moderated as much. And then when you dive into forums where people are commenting on things and arguing with each other, it could be a very insulting place. People were just attacking each other all the time. It was just like a very vicious, unfriendly environment on the internet. It could get really bad, and a lot of the major websites just shut down their commenting sections completely. I always mention Rotten Tomatoes as a good example of that. Rotten Tomatoes used to have comments, like they pulled together movie reviews from all the big reviewers, and then people could leave comments after every review, and it was just like a cesspool of horrible behavior and people saying horrible things. And if a reviewer didn't like the movie that they liked, and people started attacking each other. And I think Rotten Tomatoes finally just says, we can't deal with this, and they just shut it down. So there was no more comments, and a lot of websites moved away from anonymous commenting to where you had to have some kind of an ID. You had to register as you in order to comment. And once they did that, the comments became much nicer, much more polite, much more friendly, but at the same time, the volume of comments dropped almost nothing. Like when it was anonymous and anyone could just say anything they wanted and hide behind anonymity, people were much more willing to express their opinion, usually in a negative way. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was pretty terrible, but it was all. I used to go to these forums all the time, like the Lonely Planet Thorn Tree. If anyone remembers that, it still exists, I'm sure. But Lonely Planet had a website, and then they had a communal social media site called Thorn Tree, and you could go on there and ask questions. I'm going to Kathmandu in July. What's the weather going to be like, and can anyone recommend a hotel? That interaction between backpackers. And people would just tear into each other all the time, insulting everyone. And if you asked a question, 90% of the replies would be telling you you're an idiot for even asking the question. Or they just make fun of you for what you're trying to do, or other people trying to pretend they're better than you are. I mean, it was just a horrible place sometimes. But it was also really entertaining, and I would go there and just sort of read through the comments just for my own entertainment and to get glimpses into human nature, basically. And then the Thorn Tree, Lonely Planet had enough, and they took away the anonymity. You had to sign up and have an account with your real name, and everything became very friendly now, but also it was a very boring place because nobody ever replied anymore. There was no interaction once they made it, you had to be registered. It just became a lifeless place, and that's happened everywhere. And YouTube is the same. I remember when there were a lot of negative comments on YouTube, it could be a very hostile place in the comment section, and that's changed completely. You just don't see that anymore. However, part of it, I think, is YouTubers themselves are very careful not to open themselves up to controversy. And you see that in YouTube vlogs all the time. I mean, every video, every thumbnail, every title is about how amazing everything is. I mean, everything is wonderful, it's incredible, I couldn't believe it. I mean, just heaping praise onto the country you're visiting. It's quite something. So who's going to attack you for saying, you went to the Philippines, and the Philippines is the most wonderful place you've ever been, the most beautiful place, the people are so friendly. No one's going to attack you over that. But in this case, with the Vikings, they put themselves out there, because earlier in the video, I haven't mentioned that yet, I think they were leading up to the end of their journey, and they talked about India a lot because they came through India, then Nepal, and basically the video is sort of narrated. They have a lot of video clips, but then he's doing a voiceover telling the story, and he basically said we were defeated by India. Like, India was too much for us. It was just we couldn't take it. And of course, if anyone who's been to India, places like that, it kind of makes sense because they're in a camper van. It's a man and a woman together, just the two of them, and they're trying to drive this van across India and then park it and sleep in the van overnight. So anyone who's been to India, you're going to have an audience. I mean, I went through this all the time in the past if I tried to camp, because I always brought camping gear with me on my bicycle. It doesn't matter what country you're in, people are interested in you. So you're out there in the middle of nowhere, nothing but villages, and you get to a part of the road where you can't see any villages, you don't see any people, you think you're safe, you take your bike off the road, you put up your tent, and you think, yes. And then you turn around and there's 100 people suddenly standing there watching you. Where did they come from? You just don't know. But if a person just happens to go by your campsite, goes to the village where they live and tells people, there's a foreigner over there, I don't know who he is, I don't know what he's doing, and then everybody comes and people hear that there's something to look at, something interesting, and then before you know it, there's 100 people standing around your tent just watching you do whatever you do. That's just what happens, and in India that happens a lot. So they got worn down by people looking at them, just standing there staring at them in their van and trying to cook and doing whatever it is they're doing. And of course there were a lot of hassles with, they go to the tour sites and people trying to sell them things, tickets and taxis and all that kind of stuff. India is kind of known for people approaching you a lot, trying to sell you things, and it can get a little bit irritating to deal with that day after day after day, and they can never get privacy, they can never get away from it. So it's sort of like a no-brainer. Like, if you're telling me you tried to sleep in a camper van all the way across India and you had some problems, my first reaction is, well, duh, of course you are. How did you expect it would go otherwise? That's just what's going to happen. So there is that side to it. But they talked a lot about how India just destroyed them. Their dream was destroyed long before they got to Nepal. They just couldn't handle this scene in India. And the guy was saying that India turned him into a terrible person. He didn't like the person he had become. He started to develop anger issues. He was just angry all the time and wanted to fight with people. And then he told all this honestly in the video. So of course, just now I was scanning through the comments. These are the most recent comments, looking for anything about in Nepal, by Nepal. And there's a lot here. So you've got a real toxic group of elements here. You've got China, for one thing. They were denied a visa by China, so you get endless comments attacking China, calling it a horrible place, run by a dictator. What do you expect? And you just comment after comment after comment talking about how terrible China is, and a lot of attacking China. And then, because this video is about problems, I mean, they're not saying it was amazing, it was the best, it was wonderful. They're giving an honest account of how they felt and what they did. So there's endless comments calling them crybabies and whiners, and you should go home, and if you expected 5-star comforts, you're stupid, you're an idiot, and why don't you go home? You Europeans, you think you deserve to be treated like kings everywhere you go, and the first time you run into some problems, you start whining and crying. A lot of attacks like that. They open themselves up to those attacks. And then this made me smile because I was using Hawaii as my example. Like, why pick Japan as your dream to bring a van? Because it's an island nation, and So here we have a comment 14 hours ago. So whoever this person is, they read my mind, and the comment is very reasonable, very well written, good English, very thoughtful person, not being mean, but pointing out basically what I said. And this person wrote, Japan is an island nation, so you can't actually drive there, guys. So, I mean, you obviously knew that. And then he goes on to say, I mean, since you have to ship your van to Japan, you could ship it from anywhere. Like, you were going to ride through China, get to the coast, ship your van from there. That's just arbitrary, you know. You could have started in Europe, gone to Lisbon, put your van in a cargo ship, shipped it to Japan. You know what I mean? He's using extreme examples to kind of point out that the whole Japan destination doesn't really make a lot of sense. And he uses Hawaii as his example, and he says exactly what I said. He said, it would be like me saying my life's dream is to bicycle from Los Angeles to Hawaii. You know, because, well, yeah, you just put your bicycle in a plane and now you're in Hawaii. So he was, and then, of course, if that is my dream, I can never achieve my dream because you can't ride a bicycle from LA to Hawaii, you know? So why is your dream? He's questioning their dream and feeling so bad that they weren't able to achieve it. They could just drive their van to another port and they could ship their van from Klang here in Malaysia. They could ship it to Japan, something like that. But while the Viking travels, he kind of took the high road. He just said overland, meaning no flying, using roads and ferries. So their dream was to go overland from Europe to Japan. And if you're going somewhere overland, technically taking a boat fits in that definition, right? It just means overland means no flights. And then it's some sort of an achievement. So again, I find it interesting. He's not a native speaker of English, but he's sticking hard to technical English definitions and prepositions to, you know, defend his position. And he says, well, technically, if you're going overland, it just means no flying. So our dream does make sense. Our dream was to go overland to Japan, and that's logical because a ferry is included within the definition of overlanding. But yeah, so technically he's right, but at the same time it just kind of misses the point entirely. Anyway, but this guy is very polite, and he says, sure, you know, he's giving in. I'm not disputing that it was your stated goal and dream, but you could have just chartered a boat from Estonia to Japan, you know, and you still could. So he says basically, well, it's nothing to get bothered about because it's still kind of achievable from any port in the world. Like, I could bicycle from my home to Hawaii by taking my bike with me on a cruise ship that stops in Hawaii. But then he says, okay, I'm going to let it go at this point. He says, well, you have good videos, best regards. So, very good commenter. He's sticking to his guns, but he's being polite and encouraging at the same time. And the guy does make very good videos, very professionally done. The editing and a lot of work went into some of these videos. Yeah, so that was one of my YouTube adventures. I quite enjoyed stumbling across this video and then diving into the comments. Yeah, it really is. It's an incredible microcosm, the comments. I'm going to go through it more carefully because I like seeing that, because you do see patterns in it. So, yeah, it kind of gets in your head too. I mean, it affects even me with my talking to other people or shooting a video or telling a story, writing an email, because I like to tell stories. But for me, it is just a story, but it's very easy to slip across the line from storytelling to complaining. And I don't want to be seen as complaining, but if you don't tell the story of what happened, there's really nothing to talk about. So, I mean, a good example was my experience recently in Sumatra. this was like a weeks-long drama in my life where all I wanted to do was extend my visa, my tourist visa on arrival, for another 30 days. And then for whatever reason, the immigration office said I had to get a local sponsor for that extension, and that made things pretty complicated and difficult for me, and I had to, spend quite a bit of time and to figure all this out. So on my YouTube videos, I told that story, and I have it in my head the entire time to make sure that I tell it in a lighthearted way, because I'm not complaining. I'm just telling a funny story. This is what happened to me. I went to get this, but they said, oh, you have to get a sponsor. And then I go here and I couldn't get a sponsor, and this didn't work, and this didn't work. And I'm just documenting what happened, either in video or telling the story. But the whole time I'm doing that, I'm well aware that the fact that I can even get a visa extension for Indonesia is a privilege, because I have a passport from Canada. And there are people from many, many countries who wouldn't even be able to get this visa extension because there's more restrictions for their nationalities, Or if the reverse were true, I don't want to be seen as complaining about Indonesia, because all the people that I know in Indonesia, if they wanted to go to Canada on a tourist visa, well, they have some hoops to jump through. It's going to be much more difficult for them to go to Canada. I booked my flight back to Sumatra, and I don't have a visa. I don't need to get one. I can get one at the airport when I land. And that's a privilege for me. So, you know what I mean? You have to stay on that line between storytelling and complaining, because if you complain about not getting a visa for China, people from all over the world are watching your videos, and they're just going to come onto the comments and say, well, quit whining. You're so lucky with your European passport, you can go everywhere that we can't go. So, deal with it. That's the way the world is. And there's one guy here, a commenter just said, this is hard for you? As an Iraqi, I have a Canadian visa, but I can't even transit through any European country or the US. I have to fly directly. I can't even land in Quebec. So count your blessings. We got it way worse than you. So this person obviously is from Iraq. And you can imagine, if they hear me, telling a story about how, I couldn't get another 30 days in Indonesia on my tourist visa. And they asked me to get a sponsor. And this guy would be watching my video and going, oh, cry me a river. I'm from Iraq. And, if I try to do anything that you're doing, it's going to be 100 times more difficult. So quit being a crybaby, And yeah, it is a valid point, but it's all about tone and intention, And as I said, you try and stay on that line. And the other side, so you have to deal with that in all the comments. If you talk about a problem you faced, you open yourself up to this. And the crybaby whiner comments, you get those all the time. If you say anything honestly about how you feel or problems you face, and you get people from other countries who have it worse than you, and you get the people who have it better than you, like if they went through India and they had a terrible experience, but so many people here in the comments have been to India and they say, well, I used to live in India and it was a wonderful place and it was the best time of my life. You just have to know where to go. Like if you go to the touristy areas, you have to expect, so you should have planned better, you should have done more research, you should have done that. So if you like a country, had a good experience there, and someone on YouTube has a bad experience there, your instinct is to leave a comment saying it's all their fault, not the country's fault. I went to India and I had a wonderful time, so your problem, it was you that caused, Yeah, you have to expect those kinds of comments as well. And the final point, I guess, what you have to prepare for, if you're willing to be honest in a video and talk about problems, people will give you advice on how to solve the problem. Nice, But quite often the people giving you the advice don't really know what they're talking about. So in this case, they got a lot of comments about, oh, well, you can't drive your van through China. What you can do is go through Myanmar and into Vietnam, and then, they're telling them a different route they can follow. And Wild Vikings has replied to all these comments saying, no, you can't, because you cannot cross the land border from India into Myanmar. That border is closed. You can't cross it overland. And in Vietnam, they don't allow camper vans. So Wild Vikings has done all the research. I mean, they've already looked into it. They were trying to solve their problem, and they plotted a route, and they know they can't go through Myanmar, and they can't even take a camper van into Vietnam. They're not allowed legally into the country. So all of these people telling him, oh, go through Myanmar and through Vietnam, over and over again, he's replying and saying, well, no, you can't. You can't go through the land border. That land border is closed, and I can't go into Vietnam because they don't allow camper vans. And over again, he's explaining himself. And then other people talk about how, oh, you should have done this, get a different passport. If you because he'd been to Pakistan, that's what caused the problem. Oh, what you should have done, you should have known better. You should have gotten a new passport and a clean one and this and that. And he explains how that wouldn't have worked either. So you basically get into these discussions with all these people giving you good-natured solutions to your problem, and then you, as the person who actually knows better, you have to explain over and over again why that wasn't a possibility, or it isn't a possibility. Right? So, yeah, yeah, I'm going to read more through the comments. So that's old school YouTube right there. But it is an interesting window onto human nature in a way, to see the video and then look at people's reactions to it, all the different directions that they come from. I am nowhere near the end of all the thoughts in my head. I have so many other things I could talk about today, but I'm going to wind down. And I thought what I would do is end on a positive note in terms of YouTube stories. And then I'll just do this one very quickly. This is not a big story, but just the last couple of days I noticed that a couple of YouTube vloggers, they're from South Africa, and they've been to Malaysia before, but they have just arrived, or at least they just started posting new videos from Malaysia. And this is Chev and Dev. And they're from South Africa. Very high energy, very optimistic people, very happy people, very, positive vibes all over the place. But I think when they were here in Malaysia before, from what I can tell, they stayed in Kuala Lumpur, and they might have gone to the Cameron Highlands, but that was kind of the end of their experience. But I think they got such a positive response from people in Malaysia, like Malaysian YouTube viewers, that it kind of made them start thinking, we should go back to Malaysia. And so they decided to come back, and their very first video is called "This is Why It's So Easy to Love Malaysia." Finally back in Kuala Lumpur. So as you can tell, very positive people, and kind of the opposite of Wild Vikings. They're very careful to show everything as amazing and wonderful and positive. And people like that on YouTube, I guess. But in the very first video, I watched the whole video, and they talk about they have big plans for Malaysia. That this time they're going to travel all over the country. So they're just going to go everywhere. So they were in Kuala Lumpur for a day or two, I guess, and now they've already hopped on a train, and they went to Penang, and they took the $30 business class. So the ticket was $30, so they can take the luxurious business class train to Butterworth, and then the ferry over to Penang. And then they did a whole bunch of food stuff on Penang. And then there's one more video. I haven't seen this one yet. It says, "We can't believe Malaysia has flavors like this." And all about food. I guess vloggers know that Malaysians are very passionate about their food, and they love to see foreigners learn about Malaysian food and trying everything, so they're happy to oblige. and they're trying all the food on Penang. So yeah, Chev and Dev are back in the country. So if anyone needs a hit of positivity, and I find them to be very interesting too, just from a technical point of view. From, I dabble. That's the best I can say, I guess, at this point. I've been doing it for years, and yet it still feels like I have no clue what I'm doing. But I dabble in YouTube videos, and so I do like to see how other people do it. The gear they use, the techniques they use, and it is interesting for me to watch them because there's two of them. Husband and wife. For some reason, I'm assuming they're married. They just look like a married couple, despite being relatively young. And because they're two people, one can be holding the camera and the other can be hands-free. And I mean, the woman, Chev, is, I think, the more natural on-camera personality, just because she's very attractive, beautiful smile, lots of high, happy energy levels. So I think they probably fall in a pattern quite often where the guy will be holding the camera and then he will be handling all the technical stuff, and then she's interacting with people, talking to them, trying the food, and then they reverse. She'll hold the camera and he'll be on for a while, talking, doing things, and that makes life a lot easier, and it changes the quality of your filming, the nature of it, because it's so much easier to have another person with you to hold on to the camera. And they're using DJI wireless mics, so they each have like my Rode has two microphones. This DJI set also has two microphones, and he has one, she has one. But I keep noticing problems with that, and again, problems that I've come across. These wireless mics, in theory, they're meant to be clipped to your shirt, but the way they're designed and the way the clips work, they end up top heavy. And so you clip them to your collar, and then they instantly flop over. So you end up with this microphone pointing straight out, rather than like this one, just flat against my chest, and the microphone is on top, and that's how it's supposed to be. But if I put it on my collar, it flips forward, and it's just like sticking out from my chest, and then the microphone is pointing in this direction, and it's not picking up my voice. It's got to be up like this, or directly in front. Or if it often flips over under the shirt, and then the microphone part, the capsule, gets pressed against your skin, and then you can't hear anything at all. So it's a real problem, these things. That's why I put mine on a cord, so it doesn't flop over that much. And in their train video going to Penang, it seemed to me that their audio for their voices was very, very low. And I kept sort of, I had it on earphones, and I'm relative to the noise of the train or ambient noise or whatever, I want their voices to be more, I want it sharper and clearer. And I'm sort of like closing my eyes and I'm listening, like, okay, what's she saying, speaking very quietly and softly. And it could be settings that they use, but maybe those microphones, maybe the fact that they flop over and they're always pointing forward, they're not getting the best audio that they could out of those mics, because they're very expensive microphones. I think they're even more expensive than the Rode set, these DJI. But it's not always like that. When I saw them in the food market, I think the audio levels came up quite a bit, because I think because they're speaking louder all of a sudden, there's more noise around them, they speak louder. On the train, it was so quiet, so I think they instinctively lowered their voices, so they don't disturb anyone. Yeah, so Chev and Dev, if you wanted to dive into some. Yeah, it looks like they recently, they've been moving around. They were in Nepal doing some trekking there, and they were in India, South Africa, Korean Disneyland. Oh yeah, in South Korea, Thailand, Nepal again, and Malaysia. So in between Malaysia, which was 9 months ago, then they went to Nepal, then they went to Thailand, Korea, South Africa, back to their home, back to Thailand, then India, then back to Nepal, and after Nepal to Thailand, and then from Thailand back to Malaysia. So all of that in 9 months. And looking at the thumbnails, for 9 months, they never stopped smiling. Oh, there's some mistakes there. I see one that says, "Travel is still a mess. We made a mistake flying from Nepal to Bangkok." Interesting. I will watch that one soon. All right. I think, as I said, I got a million things I'm always thinking about. I'd love to talk about them. I have some podcast stories I want to tell, but maybe I'll do those tomorrow morning. So that's it. I'm going to shut down for now. I have my own life to get back to. I'm going to do some things. And as I said, I have my flight booked to Sumatra, which has kick-started my brain. It's gotten me a little bit more active. Having a flight booked really helps focus your brain. Focuses. I got to tell people in Indonesia I'm on my way. I'm heading back to Sumatra. So yeah, very exciting stuff going on. Not as exciting as these guys, but in the world of Planet Doug, very exciting stuff. So that's it for today, and I'll see you in the next video.